remember to record. That
Urban
app that he's
farmer.
that app that he's talking about, it's a great app for any plants that are being grown, whether it's cannabis or microgreens or, corn. And so he's focusing on disrupting big ag with the app, because the idea is that all the local farmers, you and me and anybody else that's growing food in their backyard, would then be able to use the app to grow their food. So there's complete transparency and traceability. But then any food that you want to sell in the local market, you would then just turn around and offer it to your neighbors on a exchange or marketplace. So it's very similar, because some of the ecosystem that they're thinking about is the same way that we've been thinking about the cannabis and hemp global market. So there's definitely opportunity to collaborate. And he said he's going to reach back out to me, and he's super busy today because he got flooded. Because it's exciting what they're doing, and it's applicable at the grassroots level. So it's going to be disruptive, which I like.
Yeah, and the one thing I did hear just at the very end is he was talking about small farms. If somebody has small farms, I can't deal with big, small farms. Anyway, okay, good. Always good to collaborate.
So I know you see my name twice.
Yes.
I invited my friend Pepper, who I told you about last week. And so I just sent her my link, and I was like, hey, just check this out. So that's why somehow my name showed up twice.
No, if she goes on her image or whatever, and looks up in the right-hand side, 3 dots, scroll down to edit name or rename. She can rename.
Oh, I just saw that, Len. I never knew you could do that.
Yeah. So yeah, when I signed on the other day, you gave me a link, and so we were both you. So you just click on those 3 dots in the upper right, and she can rename.
And then it updates.
Yeah, I've got a call coming in.
Pepper, nice to meet you.
I just figured out which Shira I was. So I could only have done that by actually seeing where my face is, because I was gonna be the other one.
I saw your hand get raised. That's how I knew which one you were.
I waved, yeah.
I was waving back at you. Well, pleasure to meet you.
Oh, the pleasure is mine once I fumble with my phone, and
I'll let her do that. Like I said, Pepper is an attorney in the ag space, and
as well.
So we've been talking about a compliance app, and so like that, just to kind of reiterate what we talked about last week. And then so that's why I told her to come in, because I just said I know she doesn't have a lot of time, but I definitely wanted to formally introduce her to the group that's sitting here talking about, essentially blockchain and cannabis.
These things.
I don't know how much.
So thank you to Shira. So,
excuse me, go ahead. I think there's a little bit of a lag. It's all good.
I just got here. Apologies. No, I was just saying that I just got here, and Shira's right. I've got a meeting coming up in about 20 minutes, and so I'm gonna have to bounce. But thank you for the introduction, Shira, and thank you for making sure that I'm here. It's nice to meet you, Jhavid. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Jhavid?
Yep, that's it. Perfect.
Fantastic. And so we, or rather, there's a Keep It Compliant, which is a compliance application, it's going through testing, going to be expanding to beta shortly, and then going with a phase 2 to modify and sort of hone in on some things that need to be done, adjusted, or what have you, expanded upon. And that is for compliance in general, but particularly focused on Black and brown people who are in the cannabis space, to make sure that they're kept safe.
Awesome. When is the app at what stage are you with the app? Is it conceptual, or are you guys building? Have you built anything? The compliance
phase
app.
1's done. So it's right. It's phase 1 is done. and I keep getting these emails of folks doing testing and submitting applications through the Department of Agriculture in Louisiana to be sure that they're going through the right steps and processes. So as soon as we've done with this round of testing, we'll open it up for beta so that we can have some folks jump in, see how it works, and to gather some more questions that need to be answered to expand the frequently asked questions, and that will also inform what we do for phase 2. So, you know, I won't say baby stepping, but definitely crawling.
Very, very exciting. And what does phase 1 like include? Like what kind of legal navigation does it help the user get done?
So at this point, we've got the frequently asked questions that are based upon information that we got through LSU, and some other tertiary conversations that are just, what do I do? What does this mean? What does this look like here? The original plan had to compare Arkansas and Louisiana because they're similarly situated. I'm finding now that places like Georgia are also not very far off the mark, but there are some that are pretty far ahead of us. So think Colorado, California, and there's a third one that was doing really, really well, and I can't think of the name of it. It's certainly not Massachusetts. It doesn't really matter for the point of this conversation. The point of this conversation is that in this phase 1, we have a way to apply for a license, and that license can be not only to grow, but to process, to distribute cannabis in and of itself, right? So industrial hemp being legal in all 50, not a really big deal, but the actual cannabis, whether you are converting that by value adding, or you're growing it yourself and then identifying like where it is that you can do that. The objective is that we fill out the application electronically. It can be submitted to say Louisiana. Oh, cool. It can be submitted to the state of Louisiana, and then we've got a bi-directional system that allows them to be alerted when there's been some action taken. And the objective is certainly that instead of having you go back, which is what this does, it's a one-time only event, and we can do edits if there's some sort of a rejection, as opposed to starting all over with the application, which is pretty involved in and of itself, but allows folks a little bit more maneuverability around that. And so, like I said, that's some frequently asked questions, and then moving into bigger, better things, whatever those are, because I don't know all of the things everybody wants to know.
I think it's amazing, you know, being in the industry, in the space for, 7+ years now. The application process has been one of the most daunting things for people that aren't familiar with it. And then state by state, it's so different as well. So, being able to facilitate that with the facts, with documentation, with an application process that kind of demystifies it, but also keeps people informed in terms of what actions or what kind of engagement they need to do to make sure that their application is moving along in the right way. I think that's fantastic. How many states are you right now? Is it just focused with Louisiana, or is it wide open into a bunch of other states that you had mentioned as well?
So right now, what is most completely built out is Louisiana. Next will be Arkansas, like I said, because they're closest to us in sort of phasing. It looks like in 23, they will actually have something better on the books. I was just in Georgia a couple of weekends ago, and understanding that they don't have any processors in the state in Georgia, and their distributors are fewer and farther in between than they would like. And so hearing and understanding that's really for them, it's about growing, and then on the very far end of things, doing a lot of value adds. So folks who are converting into a consumable of some sort, and then that part, that sweet spot in the middle, just isn't being filled. So the objective certainly is to function very much like Metric does with compliance receipts, that we would have a standard for all 50, or at least 48 contiguous, and we'll worry about Alaska and Hawaii later.
You know where I would also just put a spotlight on, and I'm sure you're already aware of it, but New York. I mean, I have calls with people out in New York literally every week, 1 to 2 calls. The social equity piece is what really is moving the industry, and what there's a high level of concern. Some of the insiders there that I'm talking about are already telling me that they're screwing it up, and it's almost being, it's almost being set up to fail, because like you said, Black and brown people that have been most affected by the war on drugs and disproportionately, disproportionately left out of all of this, they're going to be the ones that are the most disadvantaged without the assistance that your app is doing and helping, among other areas of the process. So I don't know, I would imagine that you would get welcomed open arms by not only the, I think it's called the OCM, that's the cannabis legislative body there, but you'd also be welcomed open arms with your app, and that will drive users and it will drive a lot of that feedback that you're talking about, right? Help make it better.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I did not realize that New York was in that state. So ultimately, the Black and brown people are disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, but also legislatively kept out from the market, from the industry in absolutely all of the states, right? So Louisiana is one of the harshest, where we have, I want to say it's 5 years off paper for a misdemeanor drug related, 10 years off paper for felony drug related, which means that by the time you're actually, if you have paid your debt, right, then by the time you are actually able to participate in the market, the doors are already closed, right? So this is a moment to get in on not even the ground floor, but somewhere second or third floor. And by the time they're ready, it just won't be a possibility. And absolutely every social equity movement, especially in this area, has failed. And the reason it's failed is that it's not baked into the cake, right? So
It's
you
an
don't need
afterthought.
icing or filling or rosettes. Exactly. Absolutely all of it's an afterthought. And just like any other program, it can be discontinued, ignored, underfunded, and it's not necessity, right? So it's not foundational, and that's what my vision is really about, making sure that we don't have Black and brown people who have done their best to follow the rules and to be involved legally in this process still end up in jail and drug charges, which is a real thing.
Yeah, I'm continually blown away when I hear that exact thing, is people within the structure that's laid out that are still being prosecuted and run down by law enforcement, where they're not doing anything different than any other operator. And then on top of it, like you were saying, this hasn't been a consideration in my state, in Washington, right? We were one of the first, us in Colorado. Only now, and I'm saying now, the last 6 to 9 months, they've been talking about their social equity piece, and their big solution is, well, we'll open up new licenses, and those will only be for Black and brown people that were in jail or prosecuted or what. But this is 7 years deep. How is it? Forget about ethnicity. How is a new licensee supposed to enter a highly, highly competitive market, a highly competitive industry, which is challenging in the best of times, and be able to operate at a level to where they actually have a chance of success? It's the cards are already stacked against any new entrants, regardless of the social equity piece and the disadvantages as they're coming to the table for. So it's frustrating as someone that's in the industry, someone that's making money in the industry, while there's people sitting in jail for doing less than what I've done. I mean, I've done $45 million worth of transactions across my platform. And there's people sitting in jail for much less.
Can you send me the link to your platform?
Oh yeah, I'll put it in the.
Thanks.
I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I was like, don't even get me started, because even with when the hemp started, like Florida grandfathered in, basically a way to get out of allowing Black farmers to farm it, like grandfathering you in from 3 generations ago or something. It was just crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
They always find some way to put you at the end. And I guess that's what I find interesting right now about what's happening with, I'm just going to say, like, the DeFi space and all of that, is that how many Black people have been early adopters for like cryptocurrency and stuff. And so I guess for me, there's so much heat on killing it for the people to use it that's outside of like standard banking. And I personally feel that's, and I'm not saying it has to be racist, but I'm saying a lot of it's racist.
A lot of it's built in that way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, Len, we can't hear you. You're on mute. There you
Yeah, I said being left out of DeFi for right now is a good thing.
are.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. But again, like I know that things have its bumps down, but and there's a lot that you have to learn. But that's part of being an early adopter. The pioneers have to deal with the bumps and the bruises
Yeah,
too.
but
But
this is brutal. I mean, what
it's
people are
brutal.
losing in DeFi right now.
It is,
So
it's brutal, it's losing, but when you come from people who don't have a lot, trust me when I say you take it and the idea that you can run with it once, it settles in a sense, like, that's why I just feel like, if we could be the early adopters and hold on to that, but the problem is that they're gonna try to regulate it away out of our hands, and then it's gonna stabilize, and then they're gonna get all the wins. No, thank you.
One of the things that I've continually been humbled by and educated, right, is being able to show up in the space and not right, and being able to come to the space and come to the table knowing that I don't know what I don't know, and then having people in my circles or people that I come across and I get to meet, getting to learn from them and have my amount of ignorance slowly diminished, right? Not gone, right? But slowly diminished, because I have no clue what that journey has been like. I literally don't. And not only because of other things going on in my life, but because I'm in the position I'm in cannabis and hemp, I'm being exposed to so much more. And it's just, I get really passionate about it because it's very infuriating. I mean, there's wrongs that have to be corrected, and we have this fucking opportunity in the cannabis industry from the very beginning to not repeat the wrongs and the mistakes that we're walking into the door with, right? Let's leave the fucking bags at the door and let's be open about the situation that we're in, the landscape that we've been part of, and let's build a better future. It sounds maybe a little kumbaya or utopian, but fucking A, like, what else are we doing? We're just gonna keep pouring gas on the fire that's burning? No, I don't want to do that.
Well, what's hilarious is that right now we're in a Cardano and cannabis space, and we've managed to talk about equity like naturally, if you know what I mean. Like, we don't have to create a space to talk about this when you're talking about cannabis, which is an interesting remark on our like society, if you know what I mean. Like, it just came up naturally.
It's part of the
but
new world, right? Like, we have the opportunity to solve these things because now we're talking about them. 20 years ago, I mean, I'm 46, 20 years ago, my circles weren't talking about anything like this. So now's a great opportunity. If it's at the surface and we can do something about it through conversation and through sharing and through interaction and being real and vulnerable, let's do it.
okay.
I was raised
Well,
by
y'all,
women. That's for me. It's
were
another
you? Is
thing. I
that
was
what's up?
raised by. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
No, I say, is that what's up? Because I was listening to your language. It's very different. You say you're raised by women. No, but I was
Yeah,
going to say that I'm going to hop over into the women group breakout room.
Cool.
But I just wanted to acknowledge and say thank you for this conversation. I appreciate you, Jhavid, and I appreciate you, Lynn. Thank you guys. And I hope to see you next week too.
Thank you, Shira. Thanks for coming back and talking with us. And bringing Pepper. Pepper, you said you had another
Exactly.
meeting you had to dip to, right?
I do. In about 5 minutes, I gotta go. How do I get my own invitation? I mean, I'm happy to be Shara, but at some point, I suppose I will have to show up as myself.
Here, let me share with you in the chat. I'll share with you in the chat the invite for the swarm meetings, the Zoom link that I have, that I use.
Okay.
Where is it? Because they're every week at the same time.
There's two. There's the one after the town hall, and then there's another on the Saturday. and you can get a meetup. You know what? If Jhavid doesn't find it, send a message to Felix Weber or to Lucio, or let's see who else. And they send out the invites, but it's not exclusive. You just have to do it. And if you do show up, as I said, on somebody else's invite, why don't you do it right now to practice? Go up to the top right of your screen, and you'll see three buttons, three dots. You're on mobile. Maybe you don't see it on mobile.
I am. I'm on my laptop. I'm a laptop. I'm sorry. I'm on my phone.
Okay, but if you're on if you're on a phone, I mean, if you're on a laptop, you go up to the right corner. There's three dots, and that doesn't work either.
No, that's fine.
Anyway,
I'll,
you can rename.
I know who I am.
You can
I
rename.
shared it. I shared it in the chat. The link the Zoom link that I have. It starts every
Got it. Thank you.
Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time.
But then you're going to be Jhavid Mohseni.
Oh, she will?
Yes.
I think it's
That's what you've been
fantastic.
saying.
You know what? Every week I'll just be somebody new. Week after that, I'll be
There you go.
luminous.
There you go.
Fantastic.
There you go.
It's
There
all
you
me.
go.
No, I will see what I can do to get my own invite, and I thank you so much for the invitation to share that. To be, yeah.
You broke up for part of that, but I appreciate you too, and I'm grateful that you were here and we were able to have conversation together. And let's keep talking, because the app you're developing,
Thank you.
I would love to integrate it with what we're building. You know, once you get to that beta or after beta stage, it's gonna offer value. I already see the value to offer to the stakeholders that I interact with and have interacted with for the last 7 years in the industry.
Maybe put your contact in the chat.
Yeah, it would
in the
be-
chat, like an email
Absolutely.
or
Yeah.
something.
Give me 2 seconds.
Okay. Dimitri, good to see you again. How are you? Are you able to talk? Are you just listening? All is good, either way.
No, I'm able to talk.
How are you, sir?
Doing okay at the moment. Bit chaotic here with the current situation, but otherwise it's good.
Yeah, yeah. Where are you based? Are you in, I think last week or the week before we were talking, aren't you based in Sri Lanka, was it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I've always wanted to go to Sri Lanka. You know, I had friends that I knew in Europe from Sri Lanka, and they were telling me about the temples and candy, and that I had to go visit and I had to hike up to the top. And then we also made jokes about the cashew fruit coming, well, the seed, right, coming off of below the fruit. So I have these images in my mind of my experiences that I'll have in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, the temple of the tooth in Kandy is where the tooth of the Buddha is supposed to be stored. It's in a golden casket and it's like worshipped by thousands every day. But the other thing about going up, that's a separate place which is called Adam's Peak. So that's like a
Okay.
mountain which, as part of a pilgrimage, people climb up, because there is a giant it's about maybe, it's like a 3 foot long or 4 foot long footprint, which is about 4 feet long by about 1.5 feet wide. So it's a footprint like that big, which is supposed to be, according to some, Adam's footprint, according to some, the Buddha's footprint, according to some, Muhammad's footprint. So different religions have different beliefs about that footprint. So that's a separate mountain called Adam's Peak. So that climbing up thing you were talking about is climbing that.
I'm always so fascinated how, you know, and it doesn't really matter, I guess, but how different religions claim the same things as theirs. But, you know, in my opinion, that's many paths to the same place. What were you saying? You said based on the situation, you're doing your best based on the situation. Is there something happening specifically in Sri Lanka that's negatively affecting life?
Yeah, because there is a 3-month long fuel crisis at the moment. So there is no fuel or very little fuel, and there are fuel queues where you have to be in line for days on end, like multiple days. And nowadays the fuel queues typically, if you are lucky enough to get fuel. Now yesterday I was in a fuel queue for 10.5 hours in the morning, from about 4:30 in the morning till about 2:30 in the afternoon.
10 and a
So
half hours.
I
And
got
you're
into the-
saying this is for fuel, for like petroleum or gasoline or diesel or whatnot.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. I had no idea.
So apart from that, there is no kerosene in the market for about a month. So people who normally cook with kerosene, they are cooking with firewood at the moment.
Is
People
this because of, I'm sorry to interrupt, is this because of the war in the Ukraine? Is this disrupted the fuel and supply pipelines all over the world, or is it something else?
No, nothing to do with that. Simply because the former ruling party bankrupted the country by stealing billions through various nefarious activities. So they basically bankrupted the country by stealing these billions, and also at the same time putting the country into heavy debt with the Chinese. So they took commercial loans from the Chinese, not infrastructure loans, but they took loans for infrastructure at commercial loan rates of like 9%, 10%, whereas they could have got development loans for like 1 or 2%, or even 0.5% above the LIBOR rate, the London interbank operating rate. So typically like country to country rates are typically 0.5% to 1% countries can get. But what the Prime Minister and the President did was they went to the Chinese because the Chinese gave them kickbacks. And basically they borrowed from the Chinese at these exorbitant rates. And nobody in the government sector, the banking sector, or whoever was involved in these things either wanted to stop them or dared to stop them, whichever of the case it would be. So the rupee basically halved from 203 rupees on the 1st of March to about 365 rupees by about the 15th of March.
You know, Dimitri, that's horrible. Well, I was just speaking to somebody from Lebanon, and the Lebanese, maybe it's a dinar, I'm not sure what it is, went from 2,500 to 30,000 in this short period of time also. So, or maybe it was 250 to a dollar to 30,000. So 250 to something like that is not, it's horrible, but there are worse cases.
Yeah, but
What happens in the country when these things happen? Are people just not able to afford anything because they don't have enough money?
yeah, because the people who depend on a rupee currency or rupee-based salaries or rupee-based interest from fixed deposits, they are basically seeing their the value of their money halved, right?
Yeah.
And when they have to pay off loans, it's more difficult. If they have to buy food, the food has gone up by 6 times. Like all the staple foods have gone up by 6 times.
People who don't have much, and even people like, I'm just thinking about it from the American level. Even though America may seem like there's a lot, most people are in debt, and most people live paycheck to paycheck. I think there's some statistic out there that most Americans only have something like $1,000 in savings account, but their life costs multiple thousands of dollars to live.
But
I mean, Len, also interested in your thoughts. What happens? Do people just I mean, what do they do?
right now the people in Sri Lanka would rather live the homeless life in America than live in Sri Lanka. Many people in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, I think that's one of the, even though Jhavid's somebody who's traveled around the world, he was just using that American example. I think that the poorest in America are nowhere near as bad as the poorest in, let's say, Asia. There really is no comparison.
I'm just wondering what people do when they're used to, say, getting $1,000 a month and it covers their expenses to, like you said, Dimitri, that $1,000 is only like $250 or 250 rupees versus 1,000. And they need to feed their family. They need to pay their loan. They need to, what do people resort to?
They can't resort to anything because the only thing they'd resort, if they were to resort to anything, they'd resort to crime. But since most of them are not going to go down that route, they're only going to suffer and wait in silence, right?
Are there massive protests? Are people like ready to burn down the government? Start over?
Well, they literally did burn down, well, not the protesters, but a faction of a particular party did burn down several members of parliament who have also been complicit in bankrupting the country. They burned down their houses, but those were not protesters per se, not the peaceful protesters, but that was a faction of a particular party who had kind of infiltrated the protests, and as a result, they went on a violent spree and burnt down several of the. It's funny because this particular party is allied with that same government party, but the people in this party, some people resorted to violence and burned down their allied members of parliament's houses. So it's weird. So it's like a false flag operation done by allies in order to blame the protests. So even more recently, the current president's house got burnt down because he was the former prime minister to the president who fled and appointed him as the president. But the former prime minister was also the leader, this guy was also the leader of the opposition and the arch nemesis of the president. So as the leader of the opposition, he stood against everything that the president stood for. But then when the president appointed him as the prime minister and thereafter as the president, everybody saw that they were both in cahoots with each other. You get it? So the people thought that this guy is going to implement a different set of policies, but right now he's basically carrying on the same policies that his predecessor or his opposition was doing. So he's basically appointed the same crooks into parliament that were there before, and the same ministers are there as before. And in fact, yesterday or something, one guy who was known to be a bribe taker was basically acquitted in a court case of taking bribes. And now he's been appointed as a minister again. And so they used to say for every 1 rupee of paracetamol, a paracetamol tablet used to be 1 rupee. So for every 1 rupee, this guy gets a 10-cent commission. So he used to be called, I think he was the one who was called Mr. 10 cents or something. He had a nickname like that. So every single, like every bandage, every tablet, every pharmaceutical, this guy would get a commission from the importing agent. Otherwise, the importing agent would not get their license. So that's how things operate here.
I am so sorry to hear that that's what's going on where you are and for the country and the people in Sri Lanka. Like it's heartbreaking. You know, I shared, I have very good friends that are Sinhalese, and you know, I spent a lot of time with them, and you know, let alone them and their families, you know, just all the people that are having to go through it. It's because of greed and, you know, the things you're sharing with me. It bothers me. It bothers me.
What is the opportunity that is there for to get involved with the Cardano and global cannabis industry? Like how do we make money by getting involved with it right now?
Specifically in Sri Lanka or in anywhere?
No, I'm saying now in Sri Lanka, it's not legalized as yet.
Yeah.
So there is no industry to get involved on a level from here, like in manufacturing or value adding or exporting or anything like that. Nothing can happen on that line until legalization happens. But my question is, me personally, let's say I'm sitting here, but I can do any work from here, anywhere in the world. I can do any sort of business cannabis or anything else and generate revenue. It doesn't have to be
Right,
something
right.
that's done here. So I mean, in fact, I
Pers-
could be buying and selling cannabis for all anyone knew, as long as I'm not growing it here. I'm not breaking any laws here, right?
Right,
So
right.
so my question is, like, what is there an opportunity that is there for people like me to get involved and do some sort of a business activity, which is why you decided to start this space?
Yeah, I got started for a couple different reasons. I was brought into the industry by friends of mine that were in it. I think that is really the first thing I would recommend is, to answer your question, yes, there's opportunities for anybody who wants to engage. They don't have to be in the country or in the location either. Because the service side, think about it from any other industry that exists, right? There's a massive ecosystem of services that supports any industry, whether it's big ag or construction or the automobile industry. There's a big support and service ecosystem. The same thing goes for cannabis in the sense that there's a big opportunity for support and services. So really, like that's how we looked at it, is we engaged with the operators and we looked for how we could solve their problems, right? The second part of your question in terms of what you could do, I think, to reinforce what I just shared, any service or support orientated business that, solves a problem and fills a need. What we were talking about with Pepper and Shira, they're building an app that is helping people with compliance, because each state has compliance requirements. And then they're also helping people doing applications for the licenses to operate. Great example of how they're applying it. My three businesses, one of them is marketplace brokerage. That really requires not only a knowledge of the industry, but a knowledge of the plant, because people who are buying and selling, they have this knowledge. So we have to meet them at least where they're at, but really we have to be at a higher level, because when we're at a higher level, we become the experts. We become the knowledge or the truth of source. So that's kind of where we position ourselves. Another business is a grading application, right? Grading and appraisal service. In the same way, we provide them insight into what the value of the cannabis is, but also what it's worth and what's happening on the global, or not the global, but the local markets. So that's another way we've engaged with the industry, because we're not plant touching and we're not necessarily in the location, but we're close enough to it. That business, that business is one that we're going to decentralize from a location point of view with technology. So, I think that us having the conversation, if there's any virtual events that you can join, or if there's any virtual or even regional industry association meetings that you can join and go to, that's kind of how I got my started. I was invited in, but then I spent a lot of my time engaging directly with the industry, getting to know people, building a network, asking them a lot of questions. So that's the advice that I would give. Are you still there? I can't get.
Last time you were talking about that the US cannot currently import from overseas, right? But you were talking about where Europe was having a large import market from overseas.
That's
so
right.
where does Europe import from at the moment?
They do some from Canada, they do some from Africa, they do some from South America. I'm trying to remember who the biggest importer or exporter was to Europe, but I can't remember it. I think it might have been someone in a country in South America, but I'm not 100%. I don't remember.
So are there like global associations which would say work together with people who want to get this thing legalized in Sri Lanka to move the whole process forward?
Internationally, it's hard in terms of being able to put any pressure on a government. I think it's more a matter of entrepreneurs and business people to make the case to the right people in government that have the ability to get that passed, right? And I've seen it happen in multiple countries throughout Europe, throughout other parts of the world. There usually is a desire by the government to move into it. I think it was Kenya. There's a new person running for government office in Kenya. I saw he made news recently because he was saying that he wants to be the largest grower and exporter in Africa. You know, so if he gets elected, he's gonna force that and push that agenda. But an international group, I mean, the United Nations still needs to change the scheduling of cannabis, because I think that the UN still has some crazy like outlaw on cannabis right now. Dimitri,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. No, I was going to ask what exactly is the reason for, let's say, the federal government to legalize it, whereas certain states are not legalizing it?
Money. I believe it's money. I believe the federal government is being held back by private interests and corporatocracy within the country, whether it's the pharmaceutical, whether it's the alcohol and tobacco industry. People are holding it back. This is what I believe. I have zero proof on this. They're chopping it up at a federal level. Also things, and this is what I've been shared with people, you know, people that are in that political world. They said to me, Jhavid, it's a lot harder to make changes on a federal level than it is to make changes at a state level. Think about it as a ship. You know, if you got a massive oil tanker or one of these container ships, really hard to turn that boat versus a small sailboat. So the federal government is that is that large ship, container ship. The states are these smaller ships, easier to change things and maneuver them versus a federal level. So those two things is what I believe is holding back federal descheduling or legalization, and at least in America.
But hasn't it been decriminalized at the federal level, whereas it's
No.
So what is it? So when you say like weed is legal in America, that means it's only legal in certain states.
Correct.
And each state, but at a federal level, they have not said anything one way or the other.
You know, it changes based on who's in the White House. When Obama was in the White House, he said it was, I believe it was called the Cole Memo. And the Cole Memo essentially was a memo to law enforcement that said, weed is your lowest priority, right? Like, don't go after weed. If you do, it needs to be at a certain level of, you know, severity, but you're not going to go after people that are smoking a joint on the street. We don't care about that anymore. But then, you know, Trump came into office and it was very different, right? Because Jeff Sessions, who was the attorney general, he was very anti. And then, you know, with Biden, you know, they said they were going to make a bunch of changes, but then you got Kamala. Kamala's actually pretty anti-weed, according to her voting record. So even though the platform said they were going to do things for cannabis, they haven't, and they continue not to. But it really doesn't come down to the White House. It comes down to the legislators, the Senate and Congress. The White House is going to be part of the decision too. But until those three things are aligned, nothing's going to change in the country. Nobody's expecting anything to change this election cycle. There is talk maybe in the following 2 years, but I think it's probably like 4.5 years until we're going to see any significant change. Dimitri, I'm getting pulled out the room. It was really good to connect with you again. I remember you did send me something. Let's definitely keep the conversation going. I'm going to hop over to the sustainable business room. Please come with, let's join that room and see what's going on there. I keep getting pinged from other people there.
Yeah, let me know once you have a chance to look through that document I sent you.
Okay.
The project proposal.
Okay, I definitely will. Sometimes I forget, other times I remember. I've just been slammed with our business and also with this Cardano thing. but I definitely will. And I don't mind you ever reaching out and just giving me a nudge and saying, hey, Jhavid, reminder.
Yeah, this was the one about the delivery tracking through NFTs, if you recall.
I-
How we
I
were planning
remember.
on using.
I remember.
Cool. So I'll wait to hear from you on that. And oh, by the way, if you are voting, do vote for my proposals, including that one. Are you voting this catalyst round?
I've got to get like the wallets set up and everything. I'm a Cardano holder, but I've got to move things around and get that done. So my task today is to get that done. Send me an email with your proposals so I know which ones to
Yep.
vote for. And I can find them. And
Right.
I'll do the same thing for you. I'll share those with you.
Will you, are you familiar with the process of setting up the wallet